And I'm going to stand up here and take questions until we got 25. Yes. I think there will be microphones coming.
I am John Coonrod with the Hunger Project. My question has to do with gender.
Gender.
So gender is a huge...
I didn't even mention it, did I?
No, you didn't. But you'd had that behavioral thing up there, and that has a lot to do. Almost all the behaviors that you cited were gender. But how do you see gender constraints impacting those structural transformations?
That's a really tough question. I did an interview this morning when I explained the origin of my book, and I got through 3 drafts of food scarcity and food security and scarcity, and my wife came out of retirement and read the 3rd draft and said, "This is crap. You have to start over." So I did. All to say that I've got 2 daughters, both highly successful. I don't think about gender as a constraint, other than in what I'm allowed to say. I understand gender roles, but it strikes me that clearly there are vastly different gender roles in different parts of the world. I mean, the Minangkabau in West Sumatra are matriarchal. Clearly there are parts of the Middle East, India, Pakistan, the subcontinent where women are really constrained in the kinds of decisions they're able to make and the freedoms that they have and the role they're expected to play. Food policy analysis had a phrase that said, we're not going to deal with the politics of food because getting the economics right comes first. I'm going to beg off and say, I'm not going to deal with gender because I think getting the political economy comes first, but I will also understand that if they're voting, they're half the world. Shannon.
Yeah, Peter, well, thank you. I mean, as usual, I enjoyed your talk. I always use you as one of the best examples how IFPRI can really decentralize our offices into different countries, regions. So the combination of good training and a country experience. Yeah. Peter Timmer, Hayami, Vanero Tan, they all did like that.
Right.
Anyway, now I have 2 questions. One is, okay, you had advised the Indonesian government in setting up the BOLOG, right?
The Food Logistics
Agency.
Right,
that's right. So what lesson do you have? Now, okay, if the Bangladesh wants to set up a similar structure, what would you advise, let's say, the Prime Minister or Minister of Food and Agriculture? That's number 1 question. Okay. Number 2 is, again, using your Indonesia experience. Indonesia has been growing pretty fast. Right? And also, even agriculture sector, food production have increased.
Yes, especially palm oil.
Yes, that's right. Well, However, the hunger level, particularly the stunting rate of children, are still very high.
Yeah.
So why there's a dislink? So what sort of policy insights you could advise us? How can we tackle that dislink?
Let me take the first question. Will Martin asked me to do a paper for a conference he did, but I just got it finished on what worked at BULOG and what did not work. If Bangladesh could reproduce the BULOG experience from 1970 to 1996, I'd say go for it. If you have to live with the BULOG of 1998 to the present, I'd say don't do it. Same country, very different political structure, and a very different political mandate to the Food Logistics Agency. Self-sufficiency has so captured the political rhetoric of food security that no food logistics agency could operate successfully in that kind of a political mandate. if Bangladesh were able to continue the kind of trade-oriented stabilization that they've been doing pretty successfully, Paul Darush, I think, has slipped out, but Paul's done some really elegant work documenting how trade has done that. I'd have to say, please don't ruin that performance with a physical logistical agency that is going to be very difficult to manage. I'm not going to say impossible, but it will be very difficult to manage in that institutional and legal environment. The potential for corruption when prices get different across the border is really great. And if you've got a really tough system that will crack down on that and keep it honest, I think those kinds of agencies actually can be quite helpful. But it's a tough set of circumstances to be productive. Second question, why the disconnect? The disconnect between rapid growth, rapid agricultural growth in Indonesia is not quite as bad as it is on the subcontinent, but it's visible, and I think 60 or 70% of the problem is that they have made the staple foodstuff so expensive that the poor are really suffering from high food prices, and they just can't get the access that they need. So I think it's as much, there's a bit of maternal education that could be done to help there, but I think a lot of it is they've got their cost structure so screwed up with their self-sufficiency campaign that they basically put this burden onto the poor. Oh gosh, I've got Gus and
Gus Schumacher, a fellow tomato grower, which are unsubsidized as far as I know, but
no subsidies.
No subsidies for tomatoes that I know of. Mike Bloomberg, I want to come back to your theme, which I thought was terrific presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
A market. Well, you said the markets have to do the heavy lifting. And then you talked about one of the pillars in utilization, nutrition, and one of the things we're working on a lot is nutrition. I'm absolutely delighted to see IFPRI doing so much work on nutrition with this Orange report. But Mike Bloomberg, not known as more of a free market, did try to ban sodas in food stamps in New York. And then a number of countries have put on taxes on sodas. Chile, Mexico, Ecuador have been heavily criticized by the soda folks as being not paying attention to market prices. Is that an area that market prices don't work, and the creation of obesity in developing countries, particularly in Mexico, which is a huge problem now and could be more in developing countries? Can you comment on that?
In 1975, I did a report for the Ford Foundation on food policy for the United States and argued for a pretty significant tax on sugary cereals. Just because even then, the evidence was pretty clear they were not healthy for kids. And I got blown out by everybody and didn't revisit it for 30 years. You know, if there were a political way to do it, I mean, obviously Bloomberg did not get he wasn't banning sodas, he was just making the jumbo sizes, he prohibited jumbo sizes, putting taxes on them at soda machines, getting the soda machines out of schools. If nutrition were on the public agenda, those are the sorts of things we talk about all the time. What are efficient mechanisms for changing diets into a healthier pattern? I reviewed a paper for, it wasn't Lancet, it was the Royal Journal of Nutrition in England, where it was food policy in London compared with food policy in New York. And the political process by which nutrition got onto the policy agenda during the last two election rounds. It'll be out shortly. It's a really neat piece of work. But it shows, first of all, we're not going to do this at the national level. It's probably going to, I think cities, mayors, maybe governors are where we're going to learn how to do this. California is going to be in the lead on this, I think. So I think we're going to have to experiment and find out what works and what doesn't work. You know, blanket taxes will run up against industry, but you'll run up against the science as well. There isn't going to be one blanket thing that works. I mean, obesity, diabetes, all of these nutrition-related problems are complex in origin. They'll be complex in solution, I think. So I'd like to see a lot of experimentation go on. I'd really like to see cities try this and states do that, and let's learn, see what works. But I'd like to do it. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying let's figure out what works. Over. So, whoever. Give them. I don't know her. How are we doing? Oh, well, good.
Thank you, Suresh Babu from IFPRI.
Oh, yes.
Just to continue.
Sorry.
Continue with Chengen's lessons question. Peter, you were in Indonesia for a long time.
Well, off and on.
Off and on?
120 trips.
Yes. When I go to Indonesia and work with the folks there, they just said, oh, Peter has just been here, you know. But then I said, why Peter has to come here so often when you can do it yourself? That the policy analyst kind of capacity question I'm asking. It's a puzzle to me why Peter has to go there all the time when we can build the local capacity, and which you concluded with. That's a fundamental thing for us to do at IFPRI, and how to do it is something I want to pick your brain on. Thanks.
You know, I've thought a lot about why did I have to get on the airplane and go do the troubleshooting? And it seems to me there were two answers. First of all, earlier on, they had really, really fantastic people at the ministerial level. I could walk in and put a regression analysis down and, oh, okay, yeah, I guess we're going to have to change the price on that. Okay, right, got it. And that's the Minister of Finance. Okay. But they didn't have any depth at all. And so I was the staff. And it turns out I looked back over 40-some years of this, and, you know, with all due modesty, I was actually pretty good at it. I could see a problem. I could take a little bit of theory and whatever data we could get and tell a cogent story. There aren't any neat models and not a whole lot of high-end econometrics there, but stories that are documented out of comparative experience, out of history, with a little bit of theory, and then connect. That's actually a difficult skill. It takes quite a bit of experience. And so what we need are people who are able to do that. And we don't have any place that trains people to tell really cogent stories around an analytically satisfactory methodology with whatever messy data we have available, but that clearly connect to the issue that the minister wants addressed. Not the one you want to get published, but the question that the minister actually has. That's not a professional track that we have. So part of it is we're not training people to do that. I feel so badly that the current phase is randomized controlled trials. You know, you can figure out whether textbooks are better than better blackboards, but you can't get the big issues addressed with randomized controlled trials, but you can't get a PhD in development economics now unless you're doing RCTs. And I think that's misguided. I think somehow we need to get back to macro policy training with, so we got to train good instinct. How do you develop good instincts? Field work. You can't do it without experience in the field. But then you need mentors. So where are the mentors in these universities? Jock's teaching a course, Derek doing, okay, so there's 15 students that have a shot. But this was talked about, couldn't IFPRI coordinate a greater DC food policy PhD program that would draw on Georgetown and AU and probably Maryland and Johns Hopkins, maybe Virginia. But if you had a coordinator, you could pull the faculty that you needed. You could design the courses. I don't know who gives the degree. I don't think IFPRI is a degree granting institution, But wouldn't it be neat if we actually had that track? You could even, if IFPRI's got, you could take it on the road, but I despair that modern PhDs in economics are going to be able to do this, what I would call informed storytelling that really make effective policy advising. Question from...
We have 2 questions from Twitter. Do you want one or both?
Give me both. We got
Okay.
10 minutes.
All right, so the first comes from Sierra Verchio, and she asks, what about transformations over 30 years that have widened inequality in access? Can we have social transformation with only markets? And the second comes from Joseph Bandana. How can national governments be lobbied to concentrate on uncultivated edible flora?
I don't know the answer to unedible flora. That takes me beyond my range of expertise. On the other hand, the first question goes right at what I've been working on for 40 years. How do you do a structural transformation without widening the distribution of income? How do you do that in a way that the agricultural transformation is inclusive, raises labor productivity on the smallest farms? It was not, in retrospect, looking back, it was not that hard with a green revolution in rice and wheat in India and China, because you already had hundreds of millions of small farmers who were pretty skilled at growing rice. They just didn't have technology or inputs or even, in many cases, markets. But once that whole package changed in the mid-60s, and you started, the breeders got the varieties to work so that the consumers accepted it, and the governments figured out, oh, the farmers have to grow this stuff, the government can't do it. But if the farmers grow it, then we have to have a marketing system that gets it from there to the consumers, but then we have to worry about the prices. So this whole paradigm of food security built around markets and prices drives you to this inclusive agricultural transformation. I think that inclusive agricultural transformation may turn out to be more difficult in Africa because there's no single transformation of a crop, a single crop, that is going to work. You're going to have to transform farming systems. It's almost certainly not going to be supply-driven from science. It's going to have to be demand-driven from now increasingly urban consumers. That means you've got to get the supply chains to work reasonably effectively back into the countryside. That's going to mean better roads, better cold storage facilities, more reliable electricity. You think of all the stuff it's going to take to have reasonably reliable and efficient supply chains going back and provisioning your own cities. That's all feasible. This is not going to be rocket science, but it's going to be expensive, and it's going to take the right kind of government involvement, but the private sector is going to have to do most of the investing and most of the decision making. That balance is, Tom Jane keeps telling me, you can't stabilize food economies in Africa because the governments don't trust the private sector. The private sector doesn't trust the government. Well, that's a standoff, because you can't do this unless you've got to start building the trust so that it's a pretty smooth transition between what the public sector is doing, what the private sector is doing in terms of the kinds of investments that need to be made. If you're at loggerheads on every single thing, that's just the kiss of death. Next over here. Okay. No, go ahead, and then we'll do.
Hi, I'm Antikisha Mbala, and I wanted to ask, the world's population has been growing over the last 50 years, and it's expected to be growing. Where do you see food security going? Okay.
I actually don't worry about population growth. I understand there's some circumstances where we're not in a desirable equilibrium between the quality of children and the quantity of children. I get that. But we've significantly outstripped the population growth in terms of our agricultural capacity. And I had dinner last night with Nick Eberstadt, and if any of you know Nick, you know he worries more about population decline than he worries about population growth, because it affects the dynamics of investment and expectations, and whether you're going to have a future that you want to invest in, and so on. I think the big problem is on the consumption, the dietary diversification and the biofuel side, not on the supply side per se. And the supply side per se, that's a population question. You got to grow enough food to feed that. But what I worry about more is the nature. What happens if we use all the fish in the world to feed the shrimp farms in Vietnam and China and Indonesia? That's not sustainable. That's not going to work. But the demand for aquatic products, the demand for seafood is growing very, very rapidly. I mean, you could see us destroying a resource base and taking 50 or 100 years for it to recover after you stop exploiting it. That's the sort of thing that I worry about. Now, is that driven by population growth? I don't think so. I think it's driven primarily by wealth and newfound tastes for high quality diets. I'm not a vegetarian myself, but I do think we've got to significantly reduce the intake of certainly of beef, but livestock products more generally. It'd be healthier, not to zero, but just not as much. The U.S. would be far better off if we ate half as much beef as we eat now. So anyway, I don't think population growth is the main driver here. I think it's more the demand side other than population growth.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Grubb with Oceana and also a fellow tomato grower. I'm curious, I realized that all of your examples of food sources were all terrestrial based.
Yes.
And this actually follows in line pretty well with what you were just saying.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I'm curious if you have noticed, or you've seen any trends in labor productivity in the marine realm, and if there's any correlation.
Yeah, it's going down because of the overfishing. I mean, if you look, the only place I really know anything about it, Indonesia and Vietnam and the coastal fisheries there, but because of the overexploitation of the resource, and you go out, more people go out for longer trying to catch fewer fish, labor productivity is clearly going down in those environments. I can't say for the deep sea trawlers out of Korea and Japan and China. I simply don't know that world. Mm-hmm. On aquaculture, my guess is labor productivity is probably, those are very, well, at least the good ones are scientifically run. My guess is labor productivity is pretty high in those environments.
Yeah, I was curious more in wild capture, so
yeah, okay.
That's fine.
Yeah,
all right, thanks.
Last question. Who wants to do the last? You guys pick. Right there.
Hi, I'm Eric Luftman from the State Department Office of Agricultural Policy. You started out talking about the importance of sustained policies
yes.
to address food security.
Right.
So can you comment on the policies implemented by the United States and other G7 countries in response to the 2008 food crisis, perhaps specifically Feed the Future program of the United States? Is this working? Is it the right approach? And any other thoughts you might have on that?
Ouch. Last question. I have to be difficult. We didn't honor our commitments in the L'Aquila Accords. The best we could do on volatility is Amos. A little more market information. I'm sorry, it strikes me as a pretty pathetic response. And not sustained. The minute the crisis went away, the attention went away, and not much I don't know what Raj Shah would say the great success of Feed the Future is, but sitting where I sit as a retired academic, but continuing as a policy analyst and advisor, I don't see a big impact. So I'd certainly be happy if somebody cited chapter and verse and said, hey, Peter, you're just not informed. That's entirely possible. But I do read the literature, and I don't see much from the donor side that's making a difference. I just think virtually all of the activity is at the country level. And donor activities can be really important when a window of opportunity comes up and you can support a country with policy reforms. But sustained transfer of resources into poor countries strikes me as making it difficult to work out the kind of long-run development strategies that are needed by these countries in these countries. So I've been a long time skeptic of food aid, but I worry that even large-scale structural aid, countries that are getting 1/3 of their national budget from foreign assistance, that can't be sustainable, but it's also undermining the incentives to get to where they need to be in incentive terms, in sustainable terms. So, as I say, I live in California. That's a long way from Washington. I'm kind of happy about that. But as I say, from that distance, I don't see big success stories leaping out at me. Sorry. Okay, I'm in Washington. I got to quit. I got to get myself to the airport in a little bit. Thank you all very much for coming. This has been good fun. I'll have to come back and do this again.
Thank you, Peter.